ways the built environment influences our behaviors. I've got a TED Talk. It's called A Parkour State of Mind. If you want to check it out, I know it's a shameless plug, but I'd really like the hits. So one of the things I like to do is talk about the pathology of an idea, sort of how I got from there to here. And so a couple years ago, maybe 5 years ago, I used to take my dog out, and I would always notice this really bright star in the sky. You see Orion here, and I started Googling what's the big bright star next to Orion, and that led me to Phil Plait and his Crash Course Astronomy. And I really just went with gusto and learned as much as I could, everything from the Cosmos series to all the information you can kind of get in pop culture as far as YouTube is concerned. It really sort of sparked a passion in me that I didn't really know that I had. And so it got me thinking about astronomy communication. So it also made me want to share it with my friends. And I kept noticing that they didn't really care. It kind of bummed people out. And I got those glossed over looks, and that made me curious about, why is this thing that's so amazing, i.e. the universe, why is it something that people just don't really grab a hold of? And so that led me to kind of thinking about some of the reasons, and that led me to the attention economy. And it's really a economic framework that deals with attention and distraction, or interest and distraction. And Davenport and Beck, they wrote a book about it, and they define it as the attention economy is a collective human capacity to engage with many elements in our environment that demand mental focus. And so you can read that. But essentially what they're talking about is we're bombarded every day with media messages and stimulus from the outside world, and it's essentially more than we can actually deal with. And so because there's more than we can deal with, the human attention span is commodified and competed over because there's money at stake. So things like outdoor advertising, pings on your phone, Facebook messages and likes. This is all trying to gain our attention because there's money to be made if they can get that attention. So Zuli from Purdue University, I apologize if I mispronounced the name, she talks about the glance. And if you think about scrolling through Instagram, and the glance is essentially a way for us to feel a sort of power or agency within that attention economy. So what she's talking about there is when I glance, I get to kind of pick and choose what I'm paying attention to. Even though with all this stimulus, there's more than I can actually handle, I feel a sort of agency, or there is a sort of agency as I co-author that attention, and I get to kind of pick and choose what I'm looking at. The interesting point here is she argues that the metric for assessing attention value varies with the media environment. And so when we think about astronomy communication, we need to think about it in terms of the media environment in which those messages are competing for attention, but also offering an instance for our glance. And so when we think about the theory of the media ecology, the picture here is kind of small, but think about, there's news media, there's social media, there's all kinds of things on the internet, YouTube, and with all of these conglomerate, and I'll talk about this DNA picture in just a minute, with all of these sort of composite sources of information, the media ecology is how we sort of parcel together a point of view or a way of thinking, or make sense of the world, if you will. It's a way of thinking about how we interact with information, and obviously in an information age, more information than we can ever deal with. So the reason for the DNA picture is when we think about the human genome, it's a composite of different human beings. It's not an actual one person's genome. And so scientists have cobbled together or made a composite human genome similar to, and it's a good metaphor to think about the communication ecology. There's all these messages, and we kind of create a composite understanding or shared meaning by sort of cobbling together all of those pieces. So when we think about the media ecology and the attention for the space race, I use these examples, Firefly and Star Trek, two of my favorites, obviously, but along with the Ancient Aliens effect, we think about the way it's not as if people aren't interested in the universe and space. It's just that the information mostly that we're given is this sort of popularization, this as if these are westerns in the stars, right? And so the way people kind of make sense of that is it's a little bit more palatable when it's put into these packages versus talking about maybe the end of time, for example, or how the universe will end. And so people are interested. It's just what the media ecology that they're grabbing from and that attention value gets challenged a little bit because of pop culture. So the Randy Quaid character in Independence Day, I think, is a really good example. It's kind of the archetype or the culmination of all these thoughts that that's either these scientists at the computer crunching numbers, or it's people like the Randy Quaid character. And I'll give you an example here of the ancient aliens effect, and how a lot of those messages that get assigned higher attention value than, say, pure astronomy, and how those kind of compete within that ecology. So here's an example of ancient
The evolution of humans on this planet has been completely and totally an experiment on the part of extraterrestrials. We'll call it experimental lab process on this planet. Intelligences are cloning and hybridizing and mixing and matching.
Earth could very well be a farm. Simple as that. It's like the island of Dr. Moreau, where we're genetic.
So I wanted to keep the clip short so that you get the idea, but a lot of these popular messages about the astronomy and what's happening in the universe is this kind of idea that these aliens have changed the course of human history and altered the ways in which human beings have developed, versus thinking about the ways that stars collapse hydrogen into helium and all those sorts of things. And so I wanted to go back. Okay, so one of the things I thought would be kind of fun would be a philosopher's corner to kind of think about or theorize some of the reasons that the attention economy and some of these popular media messages get assigned a higher value than, like I said, kind of that pure astronomy. And this is an example of light pollution. So the Earth has, you see the picture there, it's a really good example. This is not my house, but you get the idea. So the Earth has the atmosphere, and then light pollution sort of creates a different atmosphere. So we sort of operate within that atmosphere. And the reason I bring this up is we don't really interact with the sky in these quality interactions like people may have used to, and so it kind of closes off the sky, and so it even the real experience of the stars gets kind of shaded, or it's clouded literally, and so it makes it tough to really interact in meaningful ways. And so within that light pollution kind of cloud or environment, we also have smartphone addiction. So nomophobia is a real thing. The idea that you actually have a phobia of being without your phone. So within that light polluted environment, now we have something else that's grabbing our attention, and we can very easily pay more attention here than looking up at the sky. So the other thing is, in terms of thinking about why, is affect regulation. So affect regulation is defined as the attempt to alter or control one's mood or emotional state so as to maximize the pleasant experiences. And here it talks about cognitive techniques such as reframing and distraction. So distraction becomes the currency in the attention economy because as we sort of go towards these distractions, again, there's money to be made off them. So I'm going to let Phil Plait here kind of talk about, it's a short clip, but you'll get the idea that astronomy communication can kind of bum people out.
First, a bit of a content warning. The stuff I'm going to show you today is incredibly interesting, incredibly cool, and, well, maybe a wee bit distressing to some people. But I want to say that it's not all darkness and dissolution. Well, to be honest, it's mostly darkness and dissolution. But there...
Okay, so you get the idea that sometimes when we think about the universe, it can make us feel small. It can really bum people out. It can feel dark and gloomy. And so I think sometimes with that affect regulation and readily made distractions, it's really easy to affect regulate and assign astronomy communication a lower attention value. And so in conclusion, trying to keep this at 10 minutes, I'll skip the Nietzsche quote just because we're running out of time. But Maurice Merleau-Ponty, he's a philosopher in phenomenology, says that I am not in front of my body, I am in it, or rather I am it. If we can still speak of interpretation in relation to the perception of one's own body, we shall have to say that it interprets itself. And so what I wanted to talk about in terms of I'm not outside of my body or beside it, I am my body, is that we have this immediate environment itself. So we go from the light pollution to the sort of environment or the media ecology of distraction and the attention economy, and it affects us when we think about the universe and we ask questions like, are we alone? What's the meaning of life? It can make us feel small. It can make us, in our bodies, they physically react even down to the sympathetic nervous system, and it's easier to assign that a lower quality and reach for that distraction than it is to really sort of engage with astronomy, the universe, and sort of ask these bigger questions.